closed a bunch of my internet windows, so maybe that'll help.
Do you think it'd help if I
It might.
close mine?
Yeah, it
Okay.
might. So I think, are live on the internet.
This is my first time ever being live
Is it
on the
really?
internet. Yeah.
Welcome to the live world. Um, hey everybody, we're live. It's Monday night again. February the 6th. Time seems to fly. It seems like just yesterday it was 2022, and we were still on the tails of a pandemic, but here we are. So before we get started, everybody do me a quick favor. Reach up, click the share button on your Facebook feed. I'm going to remind you to do that again here in a little bit. The reason that we ask you to do that is because that just exponentially increases the amount of people that we're going to be able to reach through the live stream. People who don't necessarily follow Parents Helping Parents or who don't follow me still need to be reached with the message of hope and a message of healing. And so by you hitting that share button, it is going to drastically increase the amount of people that can hear that message. So do that for me real quick. And as we get started, I'll just welcome you back for another live stream. This is Parents Helping Parents. If you're not familiar with Parents Helping Parents, we're an Oklahoma-based nonprofit organization founded by parents, for the most part, run by parents, with the mission of providing education, resources, shared experiences, and support to parents who have children any age that might be struggling with a substance use disorder. So if you find yourself as an older adult with an adult child struggling with an alcoholism or addiction, find yourself in the right spot. Maybe you're my age and you've got a 15-year-old and they're starting to struggle with some things. You're in the right spot as well. We want to service all of those people. So I want to remind you that Parents Helping Parents as an organization has no professional expertise or experiences, and we don't provide any professional services. Our mission is simply limited to providing information, resources, and peer support to parents. And that information and resources really shouldn't be considered a substitute for professional counseling, professional medical services, legal services, or any of those things. We really want you to get those if they're appropriate for your needs, and we want to help connect you to those resources. That's just not what we do. We share our story and we share our experiences and want to provide some education. Now, we do get the opportunity to bring in professional people to help us do that education bit. That's what we do on these live streams. We've got a great professional guest that we'll be introducing here in a second to do that. So if you want more information about Parents Helping Parents, you want more information about the partnerships that we have across the state, the meetings that we host across the state, you can find that information in two ways. You can go to our website, parentshelpingparents.info, or you can check us out, follow us on Facebook at Parents Helping Parents, Inc. Those are the two places to get involved. So second reminder, click the share button, help us reach more people tonight. There's one thing I know, there's a lot of hurting families and a lot of hurting people in the world, and everybody needs a little bit of good news and to hear a little bit of conversation about what some of the solutions are. So hit the share button and maybe you'll change your life tonight. As we're getting started into the live stream, we want this to be as interactive as possible, even though we can't see you guys. And so there's a couple of different ways that you can comment and ask questions about the conversation that I'm going to be having with Beth. You can do that in the live stream of the video on Facebook. I'm watching that over here on the side of my screen. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to comment. We'll try to answer those the best we can as we go along. But remember, that is on Facebook and that's the internet. So if you comment on there, it will be on there forever. As long as this video exists, that comment's going to exist. And so that makes a lot of people nervous, especially if this is the first time as a parent you've maybe reached out for help or have done anything like this. And so we also want to provide a way for you to interact with us that's going to be anonymous and protect your anonymity out in the world. And so in the title of the video on Facebook, there is a text number that goes straight to a Google text line. I'm the only one that has access to that. I'll read the comment, I'll read the question, we'll answer it anonymously, and then those get deleted at the end of the night. So two different ways to interact with us that way. I think that's about it. I'm really excited to visit with a good friend of mine, Beth Whittle, who is the coordinator for prevention services for Norman Public Schools. Beth is an LPC and really talented at doing prevention work. And you might be asking yourselves, kind of right off the bat, what does school prevention have to do with addiction? What does school prevention have to do with what our parents are dealing with. And it actually has a whole lot to do with what we're dealing with. We know that the beginning stages of most addiction related issues start very young, whether that's trauma based, whether that's mental health based. Many of the people that we've worked with over the years, that I've worked with over the years, had lifelong battles with anxiety, with depression, other mental health issues, and trauma issues that stem all the way back into school age. And prevention work and the type of work that Beth does is designed to help those young people heal, help those young people build resilience. And the end result of that is less substance use disorders in adulthood. And so I think Beth has a lot to offer parents in terms of how to build skills and how to build resources. And so we wanted to bring her on and do that tonight. Beth, was that an appropriate introduction? I don't even know.
I think so. Thank you, Derek. I'm happy to be here.
Really excited to kind of have this conversation. The first question, Beth, that I kind of wanted to kick us off with is pretty simple. Most of us, especially if we've got like older kids or adult children, we don't even really have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in school systems. What is it in terms of like mental health trends and big major problems and stuff that you guys are experiencing, especially through the pandemic, probably changed a lot of the landscape of school counseling and school prevention? So just kind of in a nutshell, maybe talk to us about kind of what you guys are seeing and what some of the major issues you're experiencing in your work.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's no surprise to anybody that mental health concerns have definitely grown since the pandemic, not just with our older adolescents and our secondary students, but kids across the board. I had to pull some data when I first started this new position in Norman Public Schools that looked at the Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment. And if you're not familiar with that, that's an assessment that the Department of Mental Health gives out, and it's actually required for all schools to do this year moving forward. And I looked at what were some target areas I really wanted to focus on. One of them, psychological distress. The other one, substance abuse, because what I saw on our OPNA data was pre-pandemic in 2019, 58.6% of kids 6th through 12th grade reported high levels of psychological distress. So when you couple that with being outside of the school building, outside of your normal supports, and really trying to pull on your own systems for healthy coping, it really exacerbated the problem that was already prevalent in our schools. So yeah, I think a lot of our kids are struggling. I think most districts are doing the best that they can to really help bolster those prevention efforts. But I think a lot of what we're seeing is fighting the battle and the current against kids who are already in crisis based on a lack of support for the last couple of years.
How far behind the curve do you guys as school counselors and prevention specialists feel at this point with what you're dealing with? Because we miss so much time through pandemic and everything else, does it almost feel like sometimes you're just being overwhelmed with the flood trying to do damage control?
I think so. It really does. I mean, what we talk about in school language is we have a flipped triangle. Like when you talk about a multi-tiered system of support, prevention is your basic level, the bottom of the triangle, the solid foundation. We say, you have to Maslow before you can bloom. Kids have to have their basic needs met before they can learn. And when your triangle's flipped and the biggest part of your school day is responding to kids in crisis, it's hard to move upstream and catch kids before they fall into the river. So yes, I would definitely say that we're behind the 8 ball. And you mentioned school counselors, so I also should mention that this week is National School Counseling Week. So if you've got a kid in school age, please reach out to your school counselors and show your appreciation. But yeah, I think school counselors too definitely feel behind the 8 ball. They went to school to do the work of social and emotional learning and mental health promotion. And a lot of what they're doing is just putting out fires every day, seeing kids in crisis and things like that. So yeah, I would agree with that.
This question may be beyond the scope of this conversation, but I can't help but ask the stuff that rolls around in my head when I'm engaging other professionals that do some of the work that you do. I know, right? Thinking about the inverted triangle and the fact that prevention is intended to be a foundation on which every other thing is built on, but you spend most of your time managing crisis and can't quite get there. From your perspective, what are some of the maybe solutions that communities could help engage in that would flip that back over eventually, so that we don't put the entire burden of having to flip that triangle just on the school system, right? Because that seems like it's an impossible task
Sure.
for school systems to do it alone.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question, because Derek didn't mention this, but previous to my work here in Norman Public Schools, I worked for the State Department of Education and had the opportunity to work with multiple schools across Oklahoma. And previous to that, I was also in Norman as a school counselor. So I think I can come from multiple perspectives. But since I've been back in Norman, what I've found is community and family engagement is not what I remembered it being when I was at Longfellow Middle School before I went to work at the State Department. So when I was at the State Department as their executive director of counseling, I felt like everything was still this happy little bubble, like it was at my perfect school in Norman before I left. And what I found now that I've come back district level, and I'm not at that 360,000 foot view, but seeing what's going on in schools, is that schools really want the parents to be engaged. They really want the communities to be engaged. And yes, we have community partners. We have a great relationship with the Virtue Center that provides tier 3 education and treatment for our kids who have substance abuse infractions. But I think that a lot of times the supports are still not where they need to be. And that's not necessarily for a lack of wanting to engage with the schools. It's a capacity issue on all levels, not just on the school front. Our nonprofits are stressed. Everybody's at their limit. So yeah, I think the best thing that could help mitigate that would be, even if you're at a little nonprofit, or know somebody that knows somebody who might want to help, don't hesitate to reach out, because we already have these partnerships. Any school district in Oklahoma isn't going to be hesitant to want to enter into new MOUs or new partnerships that can be what their kids need. I think as far as the parent piece goes, what I've seen is we have a lot of engagement in elementary. And then when our kiddos get to middle school and high school, that parent engagement drops off. And really, middle school is where you need to lean in to those kids, even though and by lean in, I mean wrap around and support. I don't mean like lean in, but they need our support the most in middle school. And I think once a lot of our kids get there, parents are kind of like, oh, they're good now, and don't really plug into the school as much as they probably could.
Yeah, middle school is such an interesting age, because it's the age where we want to like kick kids out of the nest, but it's really the age that, like, it's hard enough being a middle schooler anyway, with the normal stresses and anxiety of puberty and change and growth. There's so much that happens between 6th grade and 8th grade developmentally that wraparound during that age, I feel like, is a vital thing.
Yeah, 100%. And when you think about substance abuse and just developmentally where the brain is in adolescence and those formative middle school years, their brains are developing so fast and creating so many neural connections to both positive and negative input. If they start using it at a young age, I mean, and we have seen it in elementary, but speaking about middle school, because that's when they have more peer pressure, they have more access and things like that. Using substances, it can have a profound impact on the structure of their brains and their brain chemistry and how things fire and how they learn. So one of the things I like to talk to parents about doing that's a great thing for prevention is talking to your kids not only about how substances are dangerous and how substances are not a part of our family rules, but teaching them about how they affect your body and your brain. Not that old egg analogy that we saw when we were kids. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs for
Right.
sure. You know, you mentioned
Right.
seeing.
Yeah, we can teach them. Sorry.
No, you're good. And we've done really good so far, like pausing and letting that internet catch up. Beth and I, before we started, we're having a little bit of just some internet delays. You were talking earlier about that 58% experiencing a mental health related issue. And in terms of prevention, and you were just talking about age of first use concepts, you know, we know that the research says that the earlier a young person first engages alcohol or substances, even marijuana, the higher the likelihood of potential abuse as they grow. And I think a lot of that's potentially related to the mental health issues that young people are experiencing because they're reaching out for some way to cope or to feel differently. What are you primarily seeing in that circle of mental health issues? Is it mainly depression and anxiety? What are the stuff that you guys see the most of?
I I think it varies by grade and age. I think for our youngest learners, specifically PK through fifth grade, what we don't necessarily want to focus on giving diagnoses at that young of an age. But what we see a lot of is different mental health symptoms of different diagnoses that are a product of rejection. I mean, a lot of our kids, they're socially excluded, and kids who can be socially excluded tend to use substances more or find peer groups that will accept them, that might have some more of those antisocial behaviors. So for our elementary school kids, I think we're mainly seeing a lot of the side effects of just that natural part of growing that is so much more profound now that our kids were isolated for so long. Those side effects of rejection can be astronomical, all the way down to just being told you can't play with me, right? So that's what we're seeing in elementary. Yeah. I don't know if do you have anything you want to, I feel like I should pause.
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to ask, you know, in terms of that social exclusion and how damaging that can be to young people, can families that are very inclusive in terms of pulling those young people in help mitigate some of the damage that somebody might experience in terms of social exclusion with a peer group?
I would say absolutely. I mean, our families are our foundation. They're our sense of self. And so families who are very cohesive and a tight unit really can help mitigate some of those negative effects of rejection. I think what we see a lot of is kids who are rejected or kids who bully. They're embarrassed about what's happening to them, and aren't always as eager to talk to their parents about what's going on. So really just keeping that open dialogue is really important. Middle school and high school, I think what we're seeing most of, yes, high levels of anxiety, a lot of apathy, and some depression.
One of the things that you were mentioning as we were kind of email exchanging about what we were going to talk about tonight was this concept of helping young people and helping families and communities build protective factors to really fight against some of these main problems with social isolation and bullying and whatever else might be some of the big culprits. What kind of protective factors, or which ones do you see as being the most important from a community and family standpoint?
Sure. I think from a family perspective, really modeling co-regulation is one of the most important things, and talking to young people, no matter how old you are, that, you know, hard feelings are real and we all have them, as much put together or not put together as we may seem, but that they're manageable. And if we can model that within the home, that when we're experiencing a stressor or we're having a difficult time, that we model how to regulate in a healthy way, then our kids pick up on that. And that's something that we talk to teachers about too. I say all the time, a dysregulated teacher cannot have a regulated classroom. It's the same that goes for parents. I talk to my 6-year-old all the time, and I'm like, okay, I can tell before I'm going into this, I'm a little bit dysregulated. I'm going to need to do some stuff for me to help me calm down in order to make this exchange go the best way it can possibly be. Because if I come in dysregulated, they are flipping from where they need to be in their brain to process information to emotional center, and then they're dysregulated too, and it's a train wreck. So that's one thing we talk to teachers about, and the same goes for us as parents. So yeah, I would say co-regulation is a huge protective factor. Also having co-established family norms and rules. I think a lot of the time as good parents, we automatically assume that our kids know the rules of our house just because that's the way our homes operate and function. And they know the values because we've instilled them in them. But having clearly defined rules and values that we don't come up with just as the parents, but are developed as a family unit, so our kids feel like they have some ownership in that as well, goes a really long way.
I think that's really important, is that conversation is had with the family, the nuclear family as a whole, and that everybody is weighing in on participating and like what those family norms should be. Do you think that the same thing is true in terms of our ability to regulate ourselves as parents, that we should maybe do a pretty decent job at communicating with our young people what we're feeling, and that it's okay that we're feeling a little dysregulated, but that we know that we need to make some corrections in how we do that? Is that an opportunity to help train?
100%. I think when we can show kids vulnerability, and I'm not coming at you from a one up, I'm coming at you from I'm a person too, and I experience hard things also, and can be brave enough to apologize when I screw up. That models for kids that, hey, it's okay to mess up. And sometimes we do flip our lid. We can't keep it on all the time. But then it's okay to go back and fix it. Yeah, I think that's huge.
That brings me to a really interesting question. I wanted to be sarcastic, but I'm not. I'm just going to ask the question standard. I know for sure that you have had the challenge of working with families who have children that are school aged, but have not done things well in the past. And maybe even, to put it quite frankly, have really dropped the ball in lots of different ways as a parent up until said point of intervention. How correctable is that? And what should parents do once they realize that it's been bad, or maybe they've, for lack of better terms, been poor parents? Like, what are some of the ways they can begin to self-correct that?
Sure. I think that number one, parenting is the hardest job on the planet. And giving yourself some grace and some space to know and recognize that, hey, what I know now moving forward is what I'm responsible for the practice of. What I knew in the past, I was doing the best I could with it. But now that I know these new things, I'm responsible for what I do moving forward. And when you can get rid of some of that guilt and shame of, I should have done this, I could have done this better, and all of those things clogging your headspace, you're really able to look more brightly at the future and see, okay, now that I've learned these things, how can I make positive steps forward in light of the new information that I've received? Even if my child is struggling now, what can I do best moving forward to help mitigate some of that stuff that might have occurred in the past?
Man, there's a huge overlap there in recovery principles that we teach people who might be trying to recover from alcohol or drug problems, which is like do the next right thing. We've done a lot of wrong things, but we've got to do the next right thing. And I love the way you put it, that you're responsible for what you know now and moving forward, and that staying stuck in some sort of parenting guilt or parenting shame about the past is only going to recycle you through bad behavior. And I've
Yeah,
told
I feel like I can say, sorry.
go no go go
No,
go.
I'm really good at interrupting. No, you said you were going to be sarcastic earlier, but that made me think of what one of my favorite professors said to me, and I guess we're on Facebook, so I can say this. If not, you can text me, be mad at me later. But what he said was, when you're talking about human change and you're talking about growth, what you can't do and what you have to do is stop shooting all over yourself. I should have done this. I could have done that. And that stuck with me because I'm the worst spiraling thinker as a parent, like, oh, I should have done that differently. But when I'm able to let that go, I can think more concretely about, okay, how do I make that not happen in the future?
Yeah, I I agree with that 100%. I think that's a huge struggle that lots of us have, is getting stuck in that same shame cycle, which just constantly just plays on repeat for us, versus saying like, hey, I know that I've done some really messed up things and I've been a bad parent, and we're always worried about being bad examples for our children. But we can also, even if as a parent we experienced our own drug or alcohol related issues when our children were school age, and they witnessed some of the problems in our addiction and witnessed some of the chaotic ways in which we live, that's a really poor example. But if we can establish a healthy program of recovery, we can also provide a really good example for what it's like to mess up, correct, and get healthy again moving forward, and that it's not this doomed type existence.
Yeah, and that for young kids, for any kid to see that is a big deal, because they can see that any kid, they, no matter what happens, they love their parents, they look to them, they're their safety net, right? No matter how dysfunctional a household can be, they look to their caregivers for that barometer on, is everything okay right now, am I safe or am I unsafe, right? So for parents to be able to show like, beyond a mess up, things can get better. Later on in life, kids will be able to look back on that when they're met with adversity in middle school or high school or life beyond school, and go, yeah, this is bad, but I can get through it, because
That's
that's
such
what's
an
modeled.
Yeah, that's such a necessary skill. I see a lot of young adults, even into their early 20s and mid 20s, who have not really ever been met with much adversity and don't know how to simply push through in healthy ways, because it's probably not going to last that long, and they're met with just the tiniest bit of adversity, and it's like things just crumble for them because there's just not any resiliency factors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I went to a conference a while back and I heard a speaker. She actually is a reporter on NPR and wrote a really great book um, called oh my gosh, now it's not coming to me because it's 7:30 on a Monday. What my body knows, or what my mind, something like that. I'll text it to you so you can send it to people after. But anyway, one of the really interesting things that she talked about was, as a person living with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder based on family substance abuse in the past, what she found was, like, especially during the pandemic, that she was always really calm during the pandemic, and a lot of her friends that hadn't really experienced a lot of adversity were freaking out, but she was able to remain pretty even keel that whole time, just because of the resiliency that she built due to her adverse experiences, but also her ability to really thrive in chaos. And I loved one of the things that she said, Derek, you might know this better because I haven't practiced my therapist muscle in a while, but it's called like um, something where you're able to almost transcend the stressful experience because of things that you've gone through. And so she was really, really leaning into talking about how trauma and past adversity is actually a superpower.
Yeah, what she's probably, I would think, and I'd have to read it to actually, I don't want to put words into her mouth, but the principle that I'm hearing in that is that if we practice enough, or if we through past experiences have been forced to, we can actually learn to overcome our sympathetic nervous system response, which is that aroused fight or flight response, and we can stay at least semi in that parasympathetic response even during a chaotic event, right? It would be similar to what police officers, firefighters, or military personnel train themselves to do.
Yes.
You know, I don't want the first time my neighborhood police officer uses his firearm, the first time ever, to be when he's trying to save my life during an intrusive event, right?
Right.
Because he's going to be freaking out. You know, Barney Fife, that just aged myself, that I grew up watching Barney Fife and the shakiest gun in the West. But, you know, I want him to have, 500,000 rounds downrange, so that when he shows up in a stressful event, he's like, I'm totally calm. I can do what I need to do. It's really interesting too. It's the same reason that we do fire drills in schools, right? Is to try to train out the panic from a classroom, so that during a crisis event, they know what to do and nobody's freaking out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said it way better than I did, and you totally picked up what I was trying to say. So thank you.
You're welcome. We talk about that all the time.
Thanks for making me sound good.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting book. And what's really interesting about that is we talk about in treatment all the time, training ourselves to do that through meditative work and breath work and those type things. And police and military train it through pretend mock events and those type things. But I actually had never thought about it in the context of being through traumatic experiences can actually accidentally train that response, even though we weren't trying to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Resiliency is something that you mentioned being really powerful and really important in terms of meeting that adversity. What are some strategies or some tools that families can use to help either reinforce resiliency or help build resiliency from the ground up?
Yeah, man, when I think of that, I just think about elementary age, which I know might not necessarily be our audience here, but I think starting off as early as you can, being okay with letting your kids screw up and not trying to fix it for them, can really help build a lot of resiliency. I think within like our secondary kids, challenging them to put themselves out there and try new things, even if they're afraid to fail, but also know that you're there as their support net if they do, is one of the best ways to build resiliency. I think one of the biggest predictors of a resilient human, especially a resilient student, is their level of hope, their hope for the future. Because if they see something that they want, that they are goal driven, they want to drive for, they feel like they have the agency to get there, they feel like they have the resources to get there, and if they don't have the resources, they know how to get them because they want that goal that bad, then they will have an immense level of resiliency because they have that hope. So I think that hope and resiliency feed in together 100%. So for a lot of our kids who've experienced trauma, they might not necessarily have that hope so much. So setting themselves up with those successful experiences is really beneficial. I just saw you touch your headphone. Do you hear that buzzing too?
I don't. I just had to itch my ear.
It went away. Okay.
Yeah. No buzzing here.
Okay, we're good.
So you said that those principles, you think about them in the context of elementary age kids, but those are actually two, I think, huge principles in recovery and in families that are recovering, which is the try not to fix it mentality, which is an enabling busting tool. When we want to enable the addict or the alcoholic, we want to do for them all the time. We want to fix everything for them so that they don't experience any hardship. And we can't do that because it's through experiencing the hardship that they realize they've got a problem. And so, yeah, I think that trying not to fix it is a big principle. And also the idea of hope. I mean, if there's no hope for a recovering family, then, I mean, both of us have wasted a lot of career time.
Yeah.
The other thing we talked about, and maybe we can wrap with this, and we've kind of hit this all along the way, but what it's like for parents to model healthy behaviors. We talked about monitoring our own stress response, and being able to monitor that. What other things do you think parents should just be in tune to or aware of in terms of types of behaviors that they really need to be modeling to their young people to help support them?
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of things. I think modeling kindness above all. I think it's really easy to displace anger when you've had a hard day. But modeling kindness, like I said, modeling that co-regulation, modeling healthy coping responses. I mean, we are all adults, and some of us drink alcohol, some of us might use medicinal marijuana, and that's to each his own. But I think having those conversations with our kids about what is healthy coping and what is healthy using, and when is an appropriate age, and what are our household rules and values regarding this, and it's an open and honest conversation, is big. Because I feel like a lot of times we might get sucked into, oh, I just got off work, I'm going to have a couple of glasses of wine, and then by the end of the night you just, mindlessly sipped, and your kids are watching the fact that now every day when mommy or daddy gets home, they just have a drink, and then it just keeps on going. So really having some limits on what we do, and what we're doing in front of our kids, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's huge for a couple of different reasons. One is because oftentimes a young person's first experience with alcohol or with marijuana is from mommy or daddy's stash. And it's taken usually without somebody knowing, and they're like, oh, I'm going to experiment while they're at the wedding this weekend, and have a little bit. And so that's, I think, is important to monitor first off, but also even for people who don't drink in a problematic way, which there are lots of people out there that drink alcohol and have zero problems. And I don't have an issue with that, but I want to be careful, even if I don't have an alcohol problem, how I talk about alcohol in front of young people, because if what they're hearing is, man, it's been such a long day, I can't wait to have a glass of wine, what I'm actually teaching them is wine is a healthy coping skill for my stress. And even if that's not the reality of what I'm doing, that's what they're picking up on between my language and my behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Absolutely.
Hey, Beth, I always ask people the same question to kind of wrap things up and maybe give an opportunity to kind of speak from their heart a little bit. If you knew for a fact that a family was watching us tonight and had a young person, school aged or not, who was really struggling, maybe they were really struggling with their parenting and what was going on, what would just kind of your concise 30-60 second message of hope be for a family that was really hurting?
Oh man, I'm not going to be putting on the spot. I could think all night about this. I'll answer it twofold. I think for students, or kids, this is a season. Nobody will ever feel suicidal forever, depressed forever, anxious forever, have peer issues forever. What they're dealing with right now is just a season. And to see that hope and to plug into, even if you feel like you don't have any protective factors, but to just lean into those few that you do have, even if they're internal, it will get you there. It will get you there, especially if you have the proper supports around you. I think for parents, man, if you're worried about being a good parent, then you're a good one. Like you're doing a great job. If you're even just concerned about the fact that you're doing good enough, means you're probably doing good enough because you're worried about it. I really don't like preaching self-care because I feel like it's kind of trite at this point past the pandemic. But I think that doing our best to notice when we need a minute and we need a breather, to be our best selves, to allow ourselves to take that minute as parents is huge. Because I'm just speaking personally and from the heart, me being the super type A overachiever that I feel like I've tried to be my whole life, and it definitely goes into parenting too. When I feel like I need to take a minute, I feel like I'm failing because I shouldn't need to have to take a minute. But the more that I allow myself to, the more I realize, oh, well, life's way easier now 5 minutes later because I allowed myself that time, and that I'm proud of myself for recognizing I needed it. So, and you got this.
Man, I absolutely love both of those responses. The way that I feel now, whether it's good or bad, is going to change. If I wait it out, something will be different soon. And you got this. Like all of that's really good stuff. So, hey Beth, thank you for all of the great good work that you're doing in the school system, working with our young people, and the passion that you have for kids and for healthy kids and for healthy communities. And two, thanks for taking time out of your Monday night to do this with me. It's been really great, and I think it's been a really productive conversation. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome, Derek. It was wonderful to be here and to see you again. And I hope all of our listeners enjoyed the conversation and also watching me fumble around on my first Facebook Live.
Hey, if you hadn't told anybody, nobody would know. It's like you're an old pro. You've done so many like conference calls over the pandemic that it's just, you're a natural. So hey, thanks again,
all right,
Beth.
well, if only I could get that red line to start going away. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back in 2 more weeks with another live stream. So enjoy your week, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.